We begin today the Gemara on Daf Nun Amud Aleph, 5 lines down from the top of the Amud, where it says Ha'amar Ameimah. It's in the middle of a sugya here. The Gemara brought before that it's mashma from the Mishnah that if a husband brings a clear raya that his wife sold him a property of nichsei milug, which is a property that belongs to his wife, but the husband eats paytas from it, that he's believed. We accept this raya. And the discussion in the Gemara is, there's a concept called that she can come and say, Nachas ruach asisi labaili, that the only reason I agreed, it wasn't a real agreement, I just didn't want to get into fights with my husband, I wanted it to be peace, so I sold it. So why wouldn't we apply that here? So the Gemara brought, based on what Rabbi Baravuna said, that this concept of Nachas ruach asisi labaili, I only say regarding any property that a husband wants to sell, whether for business or whatever it is, and it's his property. And she's going to try to prevent him of selling that. So then she'll sign off on the sale not to get in their husband's way. But when you talk about nichsei milug, which is a property that actually belongs to her, if she agrees to sell it, we consider it to be a full-fledged agreement. She doesn't have to sell it to make her husband nani nachas ruach. If she decides to sell it, it's hers. So if the husband here, in this case, brings a clear raya that his wife sold him her property of nichsei milug, it's a valid raya. And we consider it to be a full-fledged agreement to sell. That was the conclusion of the Gemara. Okay, so on this, the Gemara asks from a statement that Ameimer said. But Ameimer said, Ish v'isha shemachru b'nichsei milug. A husband and wife sold a property of nichsei milug. Again, the property that the guf of the karka belongs to her and the paytas belong to him. Lo yasuv v'lo klum. The sale does not take effect. So at this point, the Gemara understands what Ameimer is saying is that someone bought this property of nichsei milug and he bought it from both the husband and wife, because the wife owns the gufa karka, the husband is the one that owns and eats the paytas. So this person wanted to have rights on the whole thing right now, so he buys it from the husband and wife. And what does Ameimer say? Lo yasuv v'lo klum. So the Gemara understands why not. If they both sold it, why isn't it take effect? So the explanation would be because she can then later come and claim, when I agreed to the sale, it wasn't a serious agreement. I was only doing it because I saw my husband wants to sell the property, so I just didn't want to get in his way. But really, I didn't truly agree. The svara of Nachas ruach asisi labaili. So if that's the case, we should say the same thing in a case where a husband claimed that he bought this property from his wife, this nichsei milug property, that she can say, I never really agreed. Nachas ruach asisi labaili. So the Gemara answers here a few answers in the pshat of what Ameimer said, that there's a different kavanah here. It says the Gemara, Kiyit medam Meimar. What is Ameimer talking about? So not like we understood that it's someone that bought the property from both the husband and the wife. Rather, the case is that someone bought it either only from the husband or only from the wife, as the Gemara explains. Heiche de zavan iyo umis. If this person bought this nichsei milug property only from the husband, which only has the right to eat paytas, and then the husband dies, so asya ihi, again?
Bought or sold?
Well, the husband sold, and this person bought. The zavin ihu, okay, yeah, so bought is more correct. Zavin ihu, this person bought from the husband the paytas, and then umis, and the husband died. So asya ihi umafka. So now the wife comes to the buyer and says, you only bought the paytas. That's what belonged to my husband as long as he's alive. But now that he dies, the property belongs to me and I get it back. Right? So this person basically that bought it took a risk in the case that the wife will die before the husband. So then the husband is the one that yarshins his property. So now he can buy it, he can get it from the husband. But in the case that the husband dies first, so then the property goes back to the wife. So that's the first point that Ameimer said, that if the husband himself sells the property, that the buyer doesn't get it if the husband died. Hinami, then when Ameimer said Isha, it was also another case, a different case, in a case where only the wife sold it. Zav na'ihi, she sold the property, now she owns the actual property itself. Umesa, and then she dies. So now you may think, okay, so she sold the property. Now after she dies, so the buyer gets it. Usually the halacha is that a husband yarshins his wife. But you would think, in a case where the wife already sold his property before she passed away, why should the husband yarshin it? But nevertheless, the halacha here is asa ihu umapik. The husband can come and take this property away from the buyer, b'takante d'rabanan. And because this is a special thing Chachamim instituted, that the husband has the rights to this property, even if the wife sold it before when she was alive. As Rabbi Yosef Bar Chanina said, in Usha, when the Sanhedrin went to Galus, one of the places that they went to was in the city of Usha, and there they instituted Ha'isha Shemachra b'nichsei melog, a wife that sold her nichsei melog, umeisa, and she passed away. Habal moitzi miyad alakuchais. The husband can come and take this property away from the buyer. And the Chachamim basically instituted that the husband is considered to be like the first buyer. He can come to the buyer and say, "You bought the property from my wife. I bought it before you because it's my wife's nichsei melog." Chachamim wanted the husband to have a strong hold on this property, that he eats paytas from it, that so much so that she doesn't have the right to sell it. And if she sells it and she dies, the husband can come to the buyer and say, "It's mine." That was the second part of what Amema was saying, that if the wife sold it alone, the buyer can't keep it. Aval, however, if both the husband and wife together sold this nichsei melug property to a third person, inami, or going back to the case that the Gemara is discussing here, zavna ihi ledidei, she sold this nichsei melug property to her husband. Zvini, the sale takes effect, because in such a case you can't say, I only agreed to the sale because of nachas ruach asisila baili. It's her property, she agreed to sell it, and the sale is going to be in effect. That's one pshat for what Amema said. Another pshat the Gemara says, if you want, you can say different teretz, that Amema, the Oma Karabalazar. That it's true, Take, Amema is saying that if a husband and wife together both sell the nichsei melug property, the sale will not take effect. But the reason is not because of the svara we said before, because a wife could say that I only did it for the nachas ruach of my husband. Rather, it's because Amema holds like Rabbi Elazar's opinion, that holds in such a case, none of them have enough of a right to sell, as the Gemara will explain. The Tanya, we learned in Abraise, a person sells a slave. And we're talking here about an Evet Kanani. And he makes up with the buyer that for 30 days after the sale is in effect, for the first 30 days, the seller says, I still want to have the rights to use this Evet Kanani for those 30 days. Okay, so now there's a unique halacha regarding Evet Kanani, that if someone kills this Evet Kanani, if the master actually, it's only regarding the master of this Evet Kanani, kills him, but what happens is, he didn't die right away. He only died after Yom Yemayim, after 48 hours. So then the master is not chayiv misa. If anybody else will kill this Evet Kanani, the Evet Kanani has the halacha like a yid. We learn out the Evet Kanani is like a isha. He's chayiv in mitzvahs like a isha. Anybody that kills the Evet Kanani is chayiv misa, even if this Evet Kanani dies a long time later. Just as the halacha is regarding any yid. If a person kills a yid, and because of the injury that he caused, it took him a year to die, but he died because of the injury that this person caused, then he's going to be chayiv misa. But there's a unique thing by Evet Kanani, when a master kills his Eved, that if he dies after Yom Yemayim, he's not chayiv misa. So now in this case, the question becomes, who's the master and who's not the master? In that period of 30 days, so on one hand, it's the buyer, it's the seller that's still using him. That's what they made up. On the other hand, he already belongs to the buyer. It's just that the seller has the rights to use him. So the Gemara here brings a few opinions. Rav Meir says, Harishain, Yeshne b'din Yom Yemayim. It's the seller, right? The first one, the seller, that the din of Yom Yemayim that applies, that he is the master at this point, that if he didn't die right away, then he'll be potter for killing him. Why? Because he's the one that's using him. He's under his jurisdiction those 30 days. And the buyer, even though he's technically the one that owns him, really, but he can't use him at this time. So this halacha doesn't apply to him, and for him, it would be just like killing any other yid, that he would be chayiv misa even if he dies much later. Because he's not using him at this time. So now the Gemara explains what's the basis of this opinion. Kasava Rav Meir holds kinyan peiris ke kinyan aguf dami, that the one that has the kinyan of the peiris, he is the one that owns the body of the eved itself. That's the more significant aspect of ownership, that if you're the master, and therefore the din of Yemei Yamayim applies to you. Rabbi Yehuda says, Hasheni yeshnu b'din Yemei Yamayim. No, it's the buyer. He's the one that's the real master, and therefore the halacha of Yemei Yamayim applies to him. Because he is the one that it's really his money. He owns this eved now. Harisha and ene b'din Yemei Yamayim she'ene kaspai, because it's not his money. Kasavar. So now the Gemara explains that Rabbi Yehuda holds the opposite. Kinyan Peiris, laf Kinyan Agov, the one that's using him, the Peiris, the usage of this eved, is not like he owns the eved himself. The buyer, even though he can't use him, but he is the actual owner of the eved. Okay, so now this machlokes here really is based on the lashonis of the psukim, because on one hand it says in the pasuk the lashon of tachtov, that this eved is under you, that you're using him, and therefore the halacha applies. And on the other hand it says in the pasuk the lashon kaspai. So as Taisus explains over here, because in the pasuk it says both expressions, so it's not clear which one will determine who is the real master. So therefore we go according to the svara, whether we say kinyan peiris is kinyan agov, or do we say kinyan peiris is laf kinyan agov. A third opinion, Rabbi Yossi says, Shneim yeshnam b'din Yemei Yamayim. Both the seller, the buyer, this halacha, this kula of Yemei Yamayim, that if you are the master, then I didn't die right away, that you won't be chayiv misa, it applies to both. Zeh mipnei shu tachtov. This one, meaning the seller, it's because in those 30 days he's still using him. And v'zeh mipnei shu kaspai. And the buyer is because he's really the owner. So the Gemara explains what's the basis of this opinion. So here Rabbi Yossi has a suffix whether the fact that the buyer is the seller that still uses him, he has the peiris, is that like he owns him or not? So because he has a suffix about this, what do we do in such a case? The suffix nefashos lahakol. So since there's room to say that each one is still his master, and therefore the kula of Yemei Yamayim would apply if he didn't die right away, so there we're mekel, and we say that for both of them this halacha will apply. And here, this is the opinion that the Gemara is going to use to explain Ameimer's opinion. Rabbi Lazar says, Shneim einam b'din Yemei Yamayim. Both the first and the second master, this kula of Yemei Yamayim does not apply. Zeh lefi she'en b'tachtav. The seller, it's because he doesn't fully own this eved, because he's not the one that has the rights to use him now. And v'zeh lefi she'en kaspai. And the seller is because it's not his money. It doesn't belong to him anymore. So therefore the halacha of Yemei Yamayim does not apply. In order for it to apply, you have to really be the full master. Rava explained, my time the Rabbi Lazar, what's the source of Rabbi Lazar's opinion? Because Amakra, there's an extra pasuk here. When it speaks about this halacha of Yemei Yamayim, where the pasuk says, La yukam ki kaspayhu, because it's your money. Why does it add again this ki kaspay? It's an extra pasuk here. Kaspay hamiyuchad loy. It's only if it's money that is owned specifically and uniquely by one person, then I say that you are the master. You have the full rights over the eved, full ownership, and then the halacha of Yemei Yamayim will apply. So now the Gemara is comparing here and applying the same thing to the statement of Ameimer. Ameimer says a husband and wife, one owns the karka, the gufa karka, the other owns the peiris. If they want to sell it together, they can't, because none of them have real ownership in the property. So that's just like here. Benigay to this eved, one owns the peiris of the eved, the usage of the 30 days, the other owns the guf of the eved, but none of them are considered to be an adequate owner that the halacha of Yemei Yamayim should apply to him. So too in selling this property, that one owns the peiris and the other owns the guf karka, none of them have any rights to sell. That's interesting. Again? And a chanami, but this pasuk is megala, this concept, shows us this concept that you're not really a full owner to sell. Tosfos here does point out, it doesn't mean in a regular case where you have partners that own a property that they can't sell. If two people own the guf of a property together as partners and they decide together to sell, they can sell. It's specifically regarding this kind of case where one owns the gufa karka and the other owns the peiris, that the pasuk is telling us that in such a case, none of them has real jurisdiction over this karka to be able to sell. Even if they're going to sell it together, the sale does not take effect.
Why is it called if he owns the husband owns the peiris?
Yeah, he
just
has
receives the peiris.
Well, okay, but he had okay, true. But it's the Satakonas Chachamim that he has the full rights over the peiris, but not the karka itself, though. So he can't sell, and it's not so simple to understand this taka. I mean, this concept, if they both own a certain aspect and together they decide to sell, So why shouldn't the sale take effect? But that's what you learn from this pasuk here, that if one owns the guf, the other owns the peiris, none of them is considered to be a real owner to be able to sell. Okay, now the Gemara returns again to this inyan, to the same inyan we're talking about, the husband and wife, that there's a karka, and the husband was machzik in the karka of his wife, that's nichsei melug, that he has the right to eat the peiris from it. So again, the Mishnah said, "V'lo ish chazaka b'nichsei ishtay." If a man is eating the fruits from the karka of the nichsei melug of his wife, so then the chazaka would not take effect because he eats peiris there anyways. So the wife is not makbid on this. So this is no chazaka for this. On this the Gemara asks, what v'amar Rav Sheisha, Rav that is, Rav said, Eishes ish tzricha limchais. A wife, Eishes ish, does have to be moiche. So what is this talking about? It sounds like a wife has to be moiche and her husband that's eating from her karka for 3 years. So now b'man, the Gemara says, who did Rav say that a wife has to be moichan? If you would say, well, it's actually not referring to the husband that's eating in her karka, then it's clear that he can't establish a chazakah. But maybe it's talking about someone else that wants to come and be machzik in this karka, and here she has to be moiche. But the Gemara says, Rav said, Ein machzikin b'nichsei eishesish. Nobody could ever come and establish a chazakah in a property of a woman that's married, in this property of nichsei melug. Why not? Because in such a case, when someone comes to be machzik in this property, she can come and say, you know why I wasn't moiche? Because I was relying on my husband to be moiche. The fruits of this property don't even belong to me. My husband is the one that eats the fruits. So why should I be moiche? My husband is the one that's losing these fruits. So that's why I didn't bother being moiche. So therefore, in such a case, you can't establish a chazakah with someone else that wants to be machzik in a property of the seishes ish. So helalav. So if so, we must say bibal. What's the case we're talking about over here? When Rav said that an eishes ish does have to be moiche, that should be talking about a case where her husband is coming to be machzik in the karka. So the question is, but in the Mishnah it says that a husband has no chazakah in his wife's karka. So Rav answers, Lo'ilam bebal. You're right, it's talking about that the husband is the one that's being machzik, and Rav is saying that the Baal, when the Baal is machzik, the wife, the Shesish, she has to be moicha against him. The Mishnah said that he can't establish a chazakah. Here it's a different case. In a case where the husband comes into her property and he's digging ditches, he's digging a pit or caves, he's doing damage in the actual physical property itself. In such a case, he could establish a chazakah and she would have to be moicha. Meaning this that it said in the Mishnah that a husband can't establish a chazakah, it's when he eats peiris. In such a case, we say, the wife says, the fact that he's eating peiris proves that it belongs to him. It's nichsei melug, of course he's eating peiris. Or even we had before in the Gemara when he says din advara mainly that I don't have any peiris, but it's my husband, so I let him eat the peiris. But if he's coming and damaging the karka itself, which is something he has no rights to do, for sure she should have been moiche. The fact that she wasn't moiche for that proves that he bought it from her. But how could that be the case here? When a person comes and does damage in a property, and he's doing this for 3 years, you can't establish any chazakah here. And the reason is because when a person does such kind of things in a property, it doesn't prove that he's an owner. He's not using the property in a normal way. Anytime you want to establish a chazakah, as we learned before in the Gemara, you have to be using the property the way people usually use this property. If you're coming and just damaging the property, so what does it show? That you're wild, that you're stamaganev. It doesn't express the fact that you're an owner if you do this in the property. So how can we say that Rav was saying that when a husband is damaging the property, then she would have to be moicha, because otherwise it would be a chazakah? So the Gemara says, actually we could explain. Know what Rav Nachman said? Ein din chazaka l'nizakin. Adarab, he actually said the opposite is true. That binigeya to a person that comes into your property and eats fruits, over there, you're not going to establish a chazaka unless you wait 3 years. Then you could prove that you're an owner. But if you come into someone's property and you start damaging it, so the din of chazaka, which is it's only after 3 years, will not apply over here. You'll have a chazaka right away. If someone comes into your house and starts bashing the walls, or someone comes into your property and starts breaking things, you're going to be moicha immediately. He's causing you mamash damage. So over here, actually, what Rav Nachman meant to say, you would have a chazaka right away. And that's what Rav was saying. In such a case, a husband did such a thing, the wife would have to be meicher right away. And from the fact that she wasn't, the husband could actually establish a chazakah immediately. This is one answer for this. Or another answer, the Gemara says, this whole Inyan that Rav Nachman said that there's no chazakah for nizakin, it wasn't Bechlal talking about this subject, regarding the chazakah of a karka to establish a proof of ownership after 3 years. He was talking about a whole different thing. La vitmer Allah, didn't we learn about this, that Rav Mari Amar Bekutre? Rav Mari says it's talking about a person that's making smoke. So if you remember, we learned this in the second Perek, that this is talking about the halacha of a person in his own private house or in his own private property has smoke that he's producing, or Rav Zvid Amar Bebeis HaKisei, or he has outside the house a Beis HaKisei, and this is very close to someone else's property. And because of the halachas that Chachamim established regarding shchenim, you have to distance yourself from your neighbor, and in order to not to cause him this damage of the smell or of the smoke. So over there, the Gemara discussed, and that's what Rav Nachman really was saying over here, that what happens if your neighbor was there already for a while, and now you're saying, look, you were meichel. You allowed me to be here. You allowed me to put this Beis HaKisei right near your property, or to put this smoke right near your property. It's for that he said there's no concept of chazakah, because the person can come and say, I thought I could handle it, so therefore I wasn't meichel in the beginning, but now I see I can't handle it, and therefore there's no chazakah for such a thing. That was the halacha of Rav Nachman, but it has nothing to do with this halacha of chazakah and a karka. And according to what the Gemara is saying now, when you come and damage someone's karka, and you're doing this for 3 years, you could establish a chazakah. Another answer, the Gemara says, Rav Yosef Omar, Rav Yosef says, La'olam ba'acher. Going back to the original statement that Rav said by an Eishes Ish, that an Eishes Ish has to be moiche. So the Gemara before said it must be talking about the husband that she's being moiche against, because Rav himself said that nobody else could come and be machzik in the property of an Eishes Ish. But now the Gemara says actually that there is a case where someone else could come and be machzik in the property of an Eishes Ish. And when is that? Basically what the Gemara is going to explain over here is after the husband dies and this person continues holding on to this property for another 3 years. In such a case, she's going to have to be meiche. The Kagai, the case over here is Sha'achla miktzas chazaka b'chai abal. This person was eating from the karka, a while, a little bit of a chazaka, let's say 1 year, when the husband was still alive. Okay, so in that 1 year when the husband's still alive, there's no chazaka. Because she can say the fact that I was quiet is because I thought my husband would be meiche. That year doesn't count. But then, v'shalosh la'acha misas abal. And then he continued eating 3 years after the husband passed away. So now, in such a case, 3 years after the husband passed away, so here the Rashbam explains that you would think like this. She can come and say, look, this person was already eating from the karka 1 year before, when my husband was alive. Why? What happened? Because my husband, which gets the rights for the peiros, sold him the peiros. So once my husband sold him the peiros, and he continues eating from this peiros even after my husband passed away, it's obvious to everybody that he doesn't have a chazakah here in this karka. Why not? Because this could be similar to what we learned before regarding a oris, a sharecropper that has rights to peiros and a karka, and then is machzik in the karka. There's no chazakah. You're here in the karka because you had rights to the peiros. So she says, look, this person bought the peiros from my husband, and he was eating the peiros for a year, and my husband was still alive. Now he continues eating peiros afterwards. Even when he continues eating peiros now, it doesn't prove that he bought it. It's just he's eating peiros because he bought the peiros from my husband. So why should I be meiche? Everybody knows that he has no chazakah. That's what you would think. But over here, though, this is the point that Rav was saying that no, it's not true. It's not the same as an oris. Over here, in this case, migu di iboy amala. Or actually, the Bach takes out the word late. Migu di iboy yama. This person now that was machsek in the karka 3 years after the husband passed away, he could say, Ana zavinta minoch. He could just simply come and say to her, I bought the property from you. When your husband was alive, I bought the peiros from him. When he died, I had no rights for peiros anymore. And why am I here now for 3 years? Because I bought the property from you. So if he tells her nami ad zavintale, if this person now comes and says to her that you know why I continued eating the karka after your husband passed away? Because you sold the rights of this whole entire karka to your husband. Ad zavintale, you sold this property to your husband. And v'zovne nahali, and then your husband sold it to me. So therefore, I was eating already from when your husband was alive, and now I continue eating after he passed away. Mehaman, he's going to be believed in such a case. So the point over here is, it's not the same as an otis. By the case of an otis, the person's right now a sharecropper, and while he's a sharecropper, he's using it for 3 years. It's not going to be a proof that he bought it. But over here, when the husband is alive, the husband has paytas, and you're eating that paytas. After the husband passes away, the 3 years that you eat afterwards, he can simply come and claim that he bought the karka from her. Or even if he's saying he bought the karka from the husband, but he could say, you sold it to my husband. So he'll be believed with this. That was the point there that Rav said that there will be a chazakah. Let's just see one more small piece, which is a continuation and a conclusion of this. Gufa, here, this is the halacha itself that we quoted before that Rav said, Omar Rav, ein machzikim b'nichse eish esish. You can't establish a chazakah in the property of a married woman. Again, the point there is because she can say that I wasn't meiche because I thought that my husband would be meiche. There's no reason for me to be meiche. However, v'dayoni gayla amru, the dayanim in Galus, Bavel said, and the Rashbam says this is Shmuel and Karna, they both said machzikin, that you could establish a chazakah. She should have been meiche, she shouldn't rely on her husband being meiche. If she wasn't meiche, you could establish a chazakah. And then the Gemara says, Amarav halacha katayani gaila, that the halacha actually is not like his own opinion, but the halacha is like the dayanim of Galat, like Shmuel and Karna, that you could establish a chazakah in the property of a married woman. Amru le Rav Kana v'Rav Asi l'Rav. So Rav Kana and Rav Asi said to Rav, Hadabei mar mishmaite. If you're paskening now like Shmuel and Karna, is it because you're having charata from the halacha that you said that she doesn't have to be meicha in such a case? Amalahu. So Rav answered, no, I didn't have charata. Mistavra amri kid Rav Yosef. So Rashbam explains what the Gemara is saying is, I was saying that in a case where it's logical that she should have been meiche, like Rav Yosef explained before, it's in that case I said that the halacha is like the dayanim of Bava, like Shmuel and Karna. Now what's that case? The case that we just mentioned, when this person continued being machzik in the karka after the husband died, and this person continued being machzik for 3 years. Then at that point you can't say I didn't have to be meiche. After the husband died, she should have been meiche. Then Rav is made that the halacha is like Shmuel and Karna, that they could establish a chazakah.